all of my true crime fans. This is Jody with All True Crime ASMR. And today I'm going to be doing a true crime case that was requested. The Glenn Miller disappearance. So anybody under the age of 14 should not be listening or watching this. And the reason I have not been on camera lately is because my setup is kind of changed and I have not found a good place for my camera. So I do apologize for that. But it's not really intentional, it's just how it's set up right now. Miller. Actually, Alden Glenn Miller, born in 1904 and disappeared in 1944, just as the World War II was really, at its climax, basically. He is recognized as one of the most successful musicians of the 20th century, with so many top hits and soundtracks. He would go and he would perform these big bands going, through the war and bringing happiness and joy where it was hard to find any at that time. So he would fly over to France and England and just different places, and he would perform what he was trying to do back in 1944 on December 14th. So Glenn Miller Orchestra, timeless classics like In the Mood, Moonlight Serenade, Chattanooga Choo Choo, Pennsylvania 65000. Let's just talk about his life for a little bit, because he was fabulous. String of Pearls, Tuxedo Junction. I know all these. Even after 80 years after founding his famous orchestra, Glenn Miller's music is alive and well. So that's awesome. 18 musicians and singers bring the unforgettable Glenn Miller sound and perform these songs that everyone remembers. This is a show not to miss for jazz and swing fans alike, or the incurable romantics who want to step back in time. The legendary Glenn Miller was the most successful of all of the dance band leaders back in the swing era of the 30s and 40s. So that is amazing. At the College of Music in Boulder, Colorado, the nation's most famous big band leader, who disappeared December 15th in 1944, heading over the English Channel in a small military plane headed for Paris. Never landed, and nothing has been found. There had been reports that his plane had been found in 1986, but no body, just the engine of the plane, but no parts of the plane. Now, I do want to say this: the English Channel is a very volatile channel. Now, Steve Miller wanted to have some. There are so many conspiracy theories out there that it's just, it's not fair to the family, because obviously they want to know the truth, and they want to know what in the world happened to their father, husband. I definitely would want to know. I wouldn't want to think that he was a spy for the American government, or he was, involved in a plan to kill Hitler, or that, I think the top 3 conspiracy theories were Miller boarded the plane, but was assassinated after General Eisenhower sent him on a secret mission to negotiate a surrender from Nazi Germany. And why would they send Glenn Miller, a musician, over? And 12 people, more than a dozen people, saw Mr. Miller board that plane that day. So that is immediately rolled out. They say the second conspiracy theory is that he made it to Paris that Allied troops had been heading to a mission that was aborted over Germany. Now, when a couple people were interviewed that were, in that mission, one man said he did see a small Norseman plane, single-engine plane flying, that when there was over 100 planes that were landing, or that had aborted, so now they needed to land. However, they had to release their bombs over the English Channel because it was just too heavy to land. Now, one of the guys said that he saw one of the bombs blow up the plane. I don't know. I mean, that could possibly be. However, really do his part as far as keep the spirits up of these soldiers that were fighting this. Their mental state is so important because they're fighting so hard and they're giving up everything to be over there fighting for our freedom and others' freedom. That, unless you're in it, and thank you, my hat off to everybody who serves this country. My hat off to you. I have so much respect for you. It tears me up. Just, anyway. So thank you for keeping our country as free as it is. I've traveled all over the world, and there's no other country I'd want to live in, and that is because of you all. So thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on a tangent, just felt that needed to be said. Right. So this man, Sprague, he said, look, I'm going to disapprove all of these hodgepodge fantasy theories. I mean, some of them were coming out in France and different countries saying, oh yeah, I saw, Miller here and he did this or that. I mean, the guy was terrified of flying. So for one, the fact that he got on the plane was unfortunate because he really didn't. He was afraid of flying. And it gets sadder because it could have been completely prevented, but ego took over in one of the pilots. And even though he was asked he was not given a flight plan, an official flight plan. He made one for himself because he was, flying under the radar. And he went against the advice of the people in Paris that told him that they could not give him a official flight plan because it was just too dangerous. They couldn't have that on their conscience. But he forged ahead, not telling Miller or the other pilot this. Now, they were flying in a Norseman, okay? Now, this is a single-engine plane built by Pratt & Whitney. The engine was built by Pratt & Whitney. It's a workhorse, heavy plane. And it was, when it worked, it worked. However, they found that 8 other Norseman planes had gone down because of this basically de-icing problem. And back then in that plane, it was a device that was called a carburetor, and it kept the plane from icing over basically. And once ice starts forming on the wings, ice starts forming over the engine, if you don't have something to de-ice that, you're gonna go down. And it was a single engine heavy plane, workhorse. So if that part broke midair, you'd be down in 8 seconds. It would drop out of the sky. And Miller did not know this, but the 2 pilots on this flight and the one pilot that made was terrible weather coming in to Paris, that he couldn't even get a proper flight plan. Knew this and knew about. They had been all given a piece of paper saying that you're taking your life into your own hands if you're flying in cold weather in one of these planes, because this is a faulty device or part of the plane, and if it's not taken care of, it's like playing Russian roulette if you are in cold weather. Well, unfortunately, crossing the English Channel in December, the weather had dropped freezing or below. Now, neither one of the pilots was IFR rated either, which would have been more helpful, because if you can get above the ceiling of a storm, it kind of releases the weight that's put on the plane. Now, if you can't, and you're just VFR, which is vision rated, then you have to go lower, and that is just, it's like, it's heavier, it's in with the freezing weather, and if that device went out, they'd be down in the English Channel within 8 seconds. That's quick. That is absolutely quick. Now, they also found that the B-17 and the B-24, both of those planes were also equipped with this device. The difference was that they could fly above. You know, they had two pilots that were always, they were just bigger planes. They could fly above the lining, the ceiling. They could fly, in thinner altitude, which was not as strenuous on the plane. And it definitely was not a single engine. Those were two big bombers. But they did have similar icing issues. They had all been fitted with the same part. It was a huge problem. And really, until I think one of the reasons the military, now this is just my thought, I think one of the reasons the military didn't want to make or didn't release these documents to the public or to Miller's family was because they knew about this problem, and he had been in one of those single-engine planes, and both pilots had been informed, so that would have meant big lawsuits. And not only that, but then it would have brought to light all these two other planes which were heavily used in World War II that had similar issues. Now, we don't really know how many went down because of enemy fire or because of this problem. I'd be curious to know. So as this man looked into it, he actually went to the Army base and got the official records to Miller's plane crash. And he found out that what really happened to him was that it said military had conducted a full inquiry convened on January 26, 1945. Request of Major General Orville Anderson, the deputy commander of the 8th Air Force. The inquiry had concluded that Miller's plane had been lost due to a combination of factors, these being pilot error, bad weather, and possible engine problems. Now, those two pilots knew that they were dealing with a situation where it was Russian roulette. They knew that. Both pilots knew that. So yes, it was a bad decision. Miller had known that, he would never have gotten it. He said that the info had not been released and never came out because of regulations of the Army Air Forces at the time. Now, the military had no reason not to tell the family what really happened, except for the fact that this letter had gone out to all the pilots flying these planes, and the fact that Miller was riding on one and he was such a American hero and so famous that it would have caused a problem for I believe, for the military, and they wanted to keep it hush-hush. That's my personal opinion. They didn't say that. But I find it strange it took a man 2009 to really look into it and go to that base, go and pull the files that had been there since 1945, and nobody had been informed, and the military just kind of let these, I'm sure they heard of them, these theories of what happened to, Glenn Miller. Hello, they knew what happened to him. He was in one of their faulty planes, and having been over the English Channel, a very volatile place to be at that time of year, especially the weather being bad, and maybe even had something to do with the abort of the attack on Germany. Who knows? Those two things, since it was so close together, or it could have attributed to, if the pilot got into smoke, he had to even go lower, which would have made the plane even more susceptible to the freezing of the engine, and it would have dropped faster. And really, I don't know how in 1986 somebody said they found the engine of the plane, but not the remains or anything. Well, yeah, the English Channel, sweeps so fast. I can't imagine them finding anything in there. I mean, you'd have to look either way south or way north, depending on where they landed. It gives closure to the family that not only shows that Miller was a great musician and did many, many honorable things, but for his country, got on a plane and was said that when they refueled at this one station, when he got off the plane, he got off his restroom or something, but he was physically shivering. It was cold in the plane. It was already below freezing. And the plane had landed safely there, refueled, and then that is when the airport personnel that they had made this call to Paris, and he said, they were not given a clearance to actually fly into Paris. So one of two things had to happen. They either had to intentionally fly low to stay out of radar range and larger planes that may hit them, or they on the Miller, because it just was not a conspiracy or a mystery in their eyes. That's what they said. I believe that it is probably more of a legal issue, that until somebody really came and asked for the records, which they had to give him, because they did have them, that they weren't going to make it public, and they were just going to write it off. Well, it wasn't something we did back then. We don't make that common knowledge, although you would think they would tell the family. I don't know. Despite the fear of flying, to give his all towards the war effort, as many others did as well. He had no idea about the issue of the plane, which he should have, because both pilots on board did. I believe that the only disservice here was, the two pilots, the one pilot. The other pilot was this 20-year-old kid that was listening to his commander. But really, the disservice was the military keeping this information and allowing these conspiracy theories to just take on a life of their own about his disappearance. That it was really it was. I mean, just like now, if you think about it, whenever there are big storms, especially in the South in the summer, the planes will be down. They will down the planes because some of these storms are just so big you can't really get over them. And you can't go around them because it just takes too much time, and it's just easier to postpone or delay flights a lot of times. Or in the middle of winter, when there's big storm, fronts that are going through, they will close down airports for a day or two. For that reason, because planes should not be flying in ice and snow and lightning. They shouldn't. It is not good. That is not good for anybody. Especially the people on board. So, he was in a ticking time bomb. Even though it was considered a workhorse, the problem was they really didn't know. Some of these devices would work until the very end, and others would not. And if they hadn't been replaced, then they're basically Russian roulette. I mean, that's what they were playing. And that's too bad. I just wanted to kind of question why there was no rescue. Well, like I was saying, the main commander pilot ordered not to fly by the Paris Tower Airport. He demanded the 20-year-old do it anyway, and neither one of them were instrument rated, and even so, the Norseman did not have really technical instruments. It would, even with an eye of our pilot, that it would be difficult to read. And if you're right in the middle of the storm, you're either going to have to go above it or below it to be able to see where you're going, because you can get mixed up whether you're going up or down, side down or right side up. It's kind of like when you're underwater and it's dark, you don't know where you are, if you're going down or if you're going up. You really lose your sense of balance if you don't know what you're doing. So the fact that this pilot, this more advanced pilot, had been ordered not to take off, still did it, tells me that that is what really happened. Some people believe that, yes, it could have been that, they kind of got into the ally, aborted mission, and they started dropping their bombs, fairly close to where they were, but a bomb hit this Norse plane. That could be credible or it could not. They just got into the ocean. But that doesn't mean that nobody should be told, right? So I don't know if that's the one thing about that story it's hard for me to really grasp on as fact, where I think more likely is what the military found to be the case, that it was a combination of pilot error, faulty engine problems or parts, and bad weather, and that is very likely. I mean, I know it's not a very glamorous ending. It's not sensational. You're not gonna go, wow, that's great, but that is at least the truth. And I feel like the family deserves that, and so does the rest of the world, because all of these rumors of him doing such received his formal commission as captain in November, was transferred from the U.S. Army to the U.S. Army Air Forces. Just a little bit assigned to Maxwell Field, and that's where this man found all of the information at Maxwell Air Force Base. And had been there since 1944, which is that UC-64A Norseman landed at Twinwood 2 p.m. Miller and Bazell boarded the plane, piloted by Flight Officer John R. Stewart Morgan. The transport plane had to be flown below the cloud cover, anywhere from 15 to 3,000 feet. It was not an ideal day for a flight, and Miller and Bazell were not officially recorded as any manifests. On December 18th, the band finally arrived in Paris, landing at the Orly airport. So the band was quickly confused and concerned when Miller was not there to meet them. I guess so, because he was supposed to go there a day early. And it was actually flown by the Flight Officer Morgan, and that's the one I was talking about that just kind of disregarded any of the Paris. And I'm glad that this man went to Maxwell Air Force Base and found those records. The United States Air Force had kept that information from the family for so many years, because they really did suffer thinking that these crazy things, and you start to believe it after a while, because nobody knows the truth when the truth was there all along. Have a wonderful evening, afternoon, or morning, no matter where you are in this world. And thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for viewing, for listening, for commenting, for requests so much for the person who requested this case. I did not know so much about Glenn Miller. Now that I do.